They have so much potential, yet it falls under the wrong hand, from being the richest country in South America, now become among the poorest country in the world. We bringing you the untold story of Venezuela. Stay to the end, as you will never believe. How life in Venezuela has transformed, from the top heaven to unspeakable. Can you just imagine? Sitting atop the world's largest treasure chest, but still struggling to afford a single penny from it? This isn't a fairy tale. It's the reality for Venezuela, a country so rich with oil yet mired in economic crises. Why does this reality exist, and what lessons can we learn from it? Let's dive into Venezuela's vast oil wealth and the complex web of challenges it faces for a story that is as rich as it's puzzling. Venezuela, a country that's so close to United States, but so different in many ways. Venezuela, known for its dazzling landscapes and vibrant culture, holds the golden ticket, the largest oil reserves in the world. Yet, instead of prosperity, Venezuelans have faced hardship, unbearable hyperinflation, and scarcity. How is this even possible? Let's peel back the layers. For decades, Venezuela coasted on the highs of its oil riches. The government, bathing in oil revenues, launched extensive social programs to its vast citizen. Every Venezuelan loved their government. They are being grateful. They enjoyed a lot. Types of subsidies, including gas price. You would not find any other country in the world that can compete in terms of gas price in Venezuela. Even the Saudis can't afford to give that ridiculous price to their citizen. Venezuelan future deemed promising. On the surface, it all seemed well. Then, the unthinkable happened. A history that will left the scar to remain for decades to come. They never seized that coming. Neither had prepared for it. Boom! The sudden oil prices crashed. This wasn't just a market hiccup. It was a plummet that sent shockwaves through the economy. With most of its basket tied to oil, Venezuela's economy spiraled out of control. For years, the country's economy was heavily dependent on oil revenue, which accounted for a significant portion of its GDP. Venezuela's economy took a massive hit. Why did they put all their eggs in one basket, you might wonder? Economic diversification was always on the back burner. The allure of immediate oil wealth overshadowed the need for sustainable growth. Short-term thinking. But there's more to this tale. Political turmoil added fuel to the fire. Government mismanagement and policies alienated investors, stifled production, and led to a decline in the once thriving oil sector. The decline in the agricultural sector also played a significant role in Venezuela's economic despair. Once a self-sufficient country in terms of food production, Venezuela became heavily reliant on imports due to the neglect of its agricultural industry. As a result, food shortages became rampant. But the Venezuelan government had a plan, right? Unfortunately, the response exacerbated the crisis. Hyperinflation kicked in. Inflation alone had made our life miserable, let alone hyperinflation. Imagine going to bed and waking up to find the money in your pocket can only buy half of what it could the day before. How stressful could life be at that moment? Only God knows. May God forbid it. This was the reality for Venezuelans as prices soared and purchasing power plummeted. In a bid to correct course, Venezuela turned to the International Monetary Fund in the 1980s, embracing market-oriented reforms as a must requirement, which supposedly to help them to escape from this misery. Subsidies were slashed and state-owned companies were privatized. No more cheap oil, no more cheap gas, no more free education, with hopefully this would help the Venezuelan. Yet the situation worsened. This economic catastrophe didn't just hit numbers on a spreadsheet, it hit homes. Normal citizens pay the prices. The poor became poorer. Poverty surged, healthcare collapsed, and crime rates soared. Bank being robbed just to find money. That is worthless. People were desperate to find money to survive, to ensure their kids grow up. Economic sanctions imposed by the international community worsened the situation in Venezuela. Nicolas Maduro is a Venezuelan politician who has been serving as the president of Venezuela since 2013. He succeeded Hugo Chavez as president following Chavez's death in March 2013. During his presidency, Maduro has faced significant challenges, including an economic crisis marked by hyperinflation, shortages of basic goods, and a declining oil industry, which is Venezuela's main source of revenue. His administration has been accused of authoritarianism, human rights abuses, and corruption by critics, both domestically and internationally. Maduro's government has faced increasing isolation from many Western countries, including the United States and several European nations. These countries have imposed sanctions on Venezuela, targeting key government officials, state institutions, and sectors of the economy, such as oil exports. The sanctions have aimed to pressure the Maduro government to restore democracy, respect human rights, and address the humanitarian crisis. However, they have also contributed to exacerbating the economic hardship faced by ordinary Venezuelans, as they have restricted access to international financial markets, impeded the import of essential goods, and deepened the country's economic woes. Meanwhile, Maduro has sought to strengthen ties with countries that continue to support his government, such as Russia, China, Iran, and Cuba. These countries have provided economic and political support to Venezuela, offering loans, investment, and diplomatic backing, which have helped the Maduro government to weather the effects of international isolation to some extent. However, it was not enough. Venezuela was bleeding, both figuratively and literally. You might recall the uproar. When gas subsidies were cut, bus fares jumped 30% overnight, sparking widespread protests. Other essential goods and services followed the trend, make the life harder for ordinary citizens. They just want to have a normal life like us. But with the money that they have, it's almost impossible. The economic despair in Venezuela has had far-reaching consequences for its citizens. The lack of access to essential services, including healthcare and education, has led to a drastic decline in living standards. Many Venezuelans have been forced to flee the country in search of better opportunities and a more stable future. But for those without the money, they can pray to God and hope for the best. An overvalued currency exchange rate further deepened the divides, favoring the wealthy and draining the country of precious capital. As the government printed more money to cover its debts, the value of the Venezuelan bolivar plummeted. This led to skyrocketing prices, making it increasingly difficult for normal citizens to afford basic necessities. The rich become richer, yet the poor become nothing. The Lebanon financial crisis also started with an overvalued currency exchange. Look at what happened to them nowadays. It is the fault of its citizen or the fault of the over-optimistic government? Sadly, for Venezuela, it wasn't just poor policies. Corruption also played its part. Just to reflect the impact to them today, according to the Corruption Perception Index 2023, Venezuela's public services ranked the bottom second, only to losing itself to Somalia in terms of corruption. Can you imagine what kind of state is Somalia today? Similar despair faced by Venezuela, a heart-wrenching realization. For a country so rich in resources, the so-called black gold called by others, Venezuela can become the next Dubai, the next Saudi, or even the next Norway, but that dream is too far away right now. So what does the future hold for Venezuela? Is there light at the end of this tumultuous tunnel? For one, diversifying the economy is paramount. Restoring confidence among investors and addressing social needs without falling back into fiscal irresponsibility could pave the way forward for a more promising future. But beyond economics, political stability and transparent governance are critical. Unlocking Venezuela's oil wealth for sustainable development requires a multifaceted approach, tackling both immediate and structural challenges. They have so much potential. It's just that it falls under the wrong hand. What lessons can other countries learn from this scenario? How can Sudan, Somalia, Lebanon, Yemen, and other struggling nations can overcome this desperate and unthinkable situation? How can nations rich in resources avoid falling into the same traps? What passes past, we can never change history, but what we can do is to learn from them. Avoiding such mistake that crumble the life of others. Politicians should be reminded that they are working for the people, and not just to fill in their pockets.